Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with 10 essential, and I mean essential, like you can't live without them, essential symphonic landscapes for beginners. Now, landscape portraiture, of course, is one of the most famous and enduring and iconic elements of painting. And painting in tones is just as popular, especially since the 19th century and the advent of what we call program music. That is, music that describes something. It describes something outside itself. It isn't abstract. It isn't called Symphony number 26. It's called The Landscape Thing, whatever that place name happens to be. Of course, music does not describe actual things in any sort of detail. I mean, yes, you can do stylized like bird calls or bagpipes or other things like that. But what it really describes is what feelings that place engenders in us. And from those feelings, we can create in our minds, in our imaginations, our own sense of what this place must be like, what it might look like. And that's what's so much fun about this, of course, is because, when you look at a painting, you see what the artist wants you to see. But when you listen to a piece of music, you hear the tones that the composer wants you to hear, but what they mean is up to you, completely up to you. And so you are part of the landscape. It's part of your own experience of nature, of different places, your own life, your own feelings, and those create the picture that you are listening to in real time. And I think that's an absolutely fascinating experience. So here are 10 marvelous examples of that. 10. There we go. That's 5. 10 marvelous examples of it. Let's go. Let's start with Smetana. We have to start with Smetana because he wrote a wonderful work called Ma Vlast, My Country, in 6 movements, each of which illustrates another aspect of Czech land and history. The most famous number is Vltava, or the Moldau, which of course is the great river that runs down into Prague. But we're not going to do that one. We're going to do a different one, because you should hear more than just Vltava. The whole piece is magnificent. And we're starting with From Bohemia's Woods and Fields, which is a wonderfully evocative piece of music, a strange piece of music. You can decide which part is the woods and which part is the fields. But it begins with like rolling and billowing fog banks with a triangle, just portraying the sun trying to break through the fog. Maybe that's my idea. Oh my goodness, what a wonderful, wonderful tone poem it is. And it's only like 12, 13, 14 minutes long. It's somewhere in there. And it's really, really lovely. And you can use your own imagination, as I said, to think, well, what is coming out of Bohemia's woods and fields? Take your pick. Take your pick. It's a wonderful way to get into this idea of landscape. Number 2, Frederick Delius. Now, Delius was one of the great musical landscape painters in the first few decades of the 20th century, and one of his absolute masterpieces is A Song of the High Hills. It's for a very large orchestra with a wordless choir that goes, ah! It's really, really evocative. And he wrote a lot of pieces. Most of his pieces are landscapes. There's Summer Night on the River. There's On Hearing the First Cuckoo in Spring. There's The Walk to the Paradise Garden. There's the North Country Sketches. The more you know about him, the more you realize that what he was doing was landscape portraiture in tones. And so you really should hear some of his larger and more fascinating works, of which I think A Song of the High Hills is probably the High Heels. No, The Song of the High Heels is what you're singing when you go to the Met Gala. We're not talking about that. We're talking about The Song of the High Hills, as in landscape, not fashion, stilettos. Anyway, yes, The Song of the High Hills. It's just marvelous. Give it a listen. You'll love it. It takes a little concentration. A lot of what he writes is very gentle and very soft. But wow, is it evocative. So next, of course, Dvorak, In Nature's Realm, or Amidst Nature, or whatever you want to call it. In Nature's Realm is so catchy. It's part of a trilogy of tone poems, which some people in those days called concert overtures, as Dvorak did in this case, but they are Carnival, which is extremely popular, and Othello, Shakespeare's Othello. Originally, he called them Nature, Life, and Love, each one representing a different aspect of your existence. But the first one is amidst nature, and it uses the motive which is common to all three of these overtures. And that motive is it goes like that mostly, or there are little variants of it, but it's always this do-do, 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 something like that. And you hear it for the first time and most extensively in this original overture, and then you can listen to the other two because they're all musically related, but nowadays they tend to be performed separately. If you put them all together, you'd basically have a marvelous kind of quasi three-movement symphonic construction, but not really, because it's programmatic. But it's wonderful, wonderful music, and it's a wonderful comparison, back the way, to the Smetana, which is sort of the original inspiration for this piece of Dvorak's. So that's lovely, and it's not a specific landscape. It's more like a generalized. This is what it feels like when you're out in the nature, or whatever nature is, nature's realm. You can supply the specifics of the realm all by yourself if you like. Now we're going to go to dark, brooding, Celtic twilight. Ooh, Druids, Stonehenge, that kind of stuff. Arnold Bax, November Woods. Now, Arnold Bax was another superb landscape portraitist. His most famous such is Tintagel, which I've talked about before. It's a seascape. It's just thrilling, and the waves crashing on the coast. You can hear all of that stuff. But November Woods is quite different. It's dark. It's brooding. It's mysterious. Oh, my goodness. And all the people on planet Baxia who have been urging me to talk about this work should be very happy. So, hi, all you Baxians. I mean, I would wish them, a happy holidays and happy New Year, given that we're toward the end of December. But that's not when the holidays occur on the planet Baxia. They occur in the third revolution around their dual sun, and so you can't really make the equivalent. But they have holidays. They have, of course, their independence from Great Britain, just like Australia. It was originally a penal colony. Well, I'm digressing. We don't have to go into the history of Baxia. What we need to do is talk about November Woods, because Bax was very much of his time and place, and he loved all of this nature, doom and gloom and twilight stuff. And the source of almost all of that music, well, actually, I think Bax wrote his first, but one of the most potent and iconic works in that vein was Sibelius's Tapiola. Now, Tapiola means the dwelling place of the forest god Tapio. That's the god. His name is Tapio. And la means place of. It's, Finnish is one of those crazy languages that has 23 different case endings. And the locative case, the place that gives you the location, is the suffix la. So Tapiola, where Tapio hangs out. And boy, is it a big, dark, spooky, completely unpeopled landscape. Really, really wonderful. And just so much. It's 18 minutes of unbelievable atmosphere with a ferocious storm at the end. And oh God, it's fun. It's unbelievable fun. So now we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the first 5. Next, Vítězslav Novák. He's another one of those wonderful 20th century Czech composers who is as good as unknown in the West, and it's terrible because he was very, very talented and wrote wonderful music, including in the Tatra Mountains. Well, what goes on in the Tatra Mountains? He's kind of like a Czech Delius in the sense that he writes very, very, what's the word? It's meditative music in some ways, but also rooted in Czech folk tunes. and that kind of thing, but with much more advanced and modern harmonies. And these he wrote a bunch of big tone poems, and they are really, really beautiful. In the Tatra Mountains is one of his biggest, and I think one of his real masterpieces. He also did things about wood nymphs and, naughty little forest creatures and, things like that. But this is a terrific tone poem. And if you've never been to the Tatra Mountains, and I haven't either, and you have no desire to go to the Tatra Mountains, I don't have any particular need to be there. This is as close as I need to get, and I'm very, very happy with as much as I hear of it, thanks to Mr. Novák. Great stuff. Absolutely great stuff. After that, Holst, Egdon Heath. Now, Egdon Heath is not a real place. Egdon Heath is an imaginary place from a Thomas Hardy poem or novel or something or other by Thomas Hardy. And if anyone tells me what it is, I will ban you from this channel forever because nobody cares. What matters is what the imaginary place is like. And there are plenty of Heaths in England that are just as Heathy as the Egdon Heath. A Holst knew Thomas Hardy. And unfortunately, Thomas Hardy died 3 weeks before the premiere of this work. Holst considered it his most perfectly realized work. Far greater, he felt, than the planets. But it is a piece which features, as Thomas Hardy himself said, a certain swarthy monotony or something like that. It's 14 minutes of stillness, of barely moving. It has a sort of gray, monotony, but monotony in an artistic sense. Well, you can tell me, is this monotony artistic or is it just monotonous monotony? I think it's artistic monotony. I really do. I think it's a fabulously atmospheric work, but it does take a little bit of focus and attention to get into because of its very stillness. It's mostly very quiet. It's written for a fairly large orchestra, but Holst uses it with extreme refinement and precision, and it's all in the service of this atmosphere. It is audibly related to Sibelius's Tapiola, I think. What Holst knew of that work, I have no idea, although this was written after the Holst. That I'm pretty sure of. After the Sibelius. I'm pretty sure of that. I could look up the dates, but, like I said, the point is listening. The point is not chronology or who listened to what and did that. It's just not important. Egdon Heath is a masterpiece of atmosphere. And that's what landscapes are about. More than anything else, musical landscapes are about atmosphere. They're not about describing this particular shrub or depicting the critters in the wildlife. So Egdon Heath is a major, major work. Next, Hovhaness, Mysterious Mountain. Now, Alan Hovhaness wrote something like, 87 symphonies or 68 symphonies or some crazy number. And a lot of his works, symphonic and not, feature mountains. Mountains, the idea of mountains as places of worship, as places of sort of transcendental, mystical union with the godhood. He did a Mount St. Helens symphony that has a genuine volcanic eruption going off in it. It's really quite wonderful. But it's a beautiful, beautiful work. It's so beautiful. And it had this enormous popularity in the late 50s and early 60s because Leopold Stokowski premiered it. Fritz Reiner recorded it. It was really, really well known for a while. And then Hovhaness kind of faded away, largely because most of what he wrote sounds a lot like Mysterious Mountain. And so if you've heard a few things, you get a sense of what it is, and you may not want any more. But you should at least hear Mysterious Mountain because it is a landscape, a beautiful landscape. And another one that's more spiritual than physical. You don't see here like ruts in the road and rainfall and that kind of stuff. It's much, much more abstract and refined and conceptual in terms of what the mountain represents as a big, brooding presence in our lives. Glorious work. Absolutely beautiful. Next, here's something a little bit more quotidienne, but none the worse for that. Walter Piston's 3 New England Sketches. I'm from New England. I love these pieces. I absolutely love these pieces. There's a seascape. There's a mountain thing. It's the usual sketches of landscapes in New England. But here, there's nothing of the transcendental about it whatsoever. Not a bit. This is simply marvelously colorful impressions of the actual landscapes that Piston is depicting. And you get 3 for the price of 1, which is a great deal. The first movement is really one of the great seascapes. It's a fantastic piece. Absolutely fantastic. Beautifully evocative. You hear, the swell of the ocean, and you get like, well, but it's a New England ocean. It's not the Caribbean. You don't hear like steel drums and taste pineapple while it's going. No, it's a little gray. It's a little dark. It's a little rocky on the coast. It's not romanticized. It's just beautiful. All work is just wonderful. Absolutely glorious. And last but not least, there are so many landscapes. Let me just say before I do the last one here, there are millions of them, and millions of them that I could have mentioned, and I'm not. And remember the rules for these essential lists. No additions. Talk about the list if you want to talk. But we don't need more. This is plenty. 10 of them is a lot, and some of this is going to be very unfamiliar, especially to newcomers. So let's leave it at 10. And, if we want to do sequels, we can do sequels. Maybe I'll do some sequels. I haven't done a sequel talk in a while. Maybe I'll do a landscape sequel talk or something like that, where there's a place to bring in all these other pieces. Because, like I said, it's one of the most popular sources of musical inspiration. So let's wrap it up with Richard Strauss's Alpine Symphony. Oh, yeah, a day in the life of an Alp. Now, this sucker is like 45, 50 minutes long. It's a big, long journey climbing up the mountain and going down the mountain. And when you go up, you see all kinds of stuff. You see cows. You hear the cowbells tinkling along. You hear you hear the waterfall with the Fairy of the Alps pop. The Fairy of the Alps always pops up. She pops up in Tchaikovsky's Manfred Symphony too, and in a very similar context. She's in a waterfall, so you like that. And then you get to the summit, and there are dangerous moments on the glaciers, and then you get to the top, and there's a sudden stillness, and you get this hellacious thunderstorm that's absolutely spectacular. And the thunderstorm is also the descent. It's like you slip and you fall down the whole mountain on your ass. It takes like 5 minutes to get down and 40 minutes to get up. But it doesn't matter because it's a great storm. And then the music slowly proceeds backwards to night, from whence it began. Night, glorious night. And that is the last of these fabulous landscapes, 10 amazing musical landscapes that are just perfect if you're starting out in your musical journey and you want to get a sense of, they're wonderful pieces to help you get into the act of listening and bringing your own imagination to bear in realizing the details of what you're hearing. So I think it's a lot of fun for that reason, and I hope you take up the challenge and enjoy it. Keep on listening, friends. Thank you so much for joining me. Take care.